Record, that's fine. We can move forward. I know we have Revere TV on here, and we can bring up the YouTube for the minutes. So Susan, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, welcome everyone to the Revere High School Building Committee meeting number 51. Today is Thursday, June 29th, 2023, and the time is 5:31 p.m. Linda's not here. Brian, you'll be doing the roll call?
Yes, I will. Let's see. Mike Picardi.
Here.
Stacy.
Here.
Susan.
Here.
Dr. Kelly.
Here.
Carl.
Here.
Principal Bowen.
Here.
Joanne.
Here.
Thank you. And unless somebody who just joined as another committee member, I believe Rich Viscay is not here. Dawn Chermella is not here. Nick is not here. Jerry and Intermayor Keefe is not here. So I'll mark it that way. Just looking at the attendance here. Okay. I'm going to share my screen here. I think we might come on and off sharing the screen, but we have a relatively short agenda for tonight. Really just going through a quick recap on the board meeting, and then Perkins Eastman has a design options update. So I think we'll jump right into that. One of the items that I emailed the committee just tonight was the record letter that I have on the screen here. We will post this as part of the presentation for tonight. And I'm trying to figure out if I can zoom in, but my Zoom controls are in the way. So long story short, what's on the screen here is the record letter from the MSBA approving the feasibility extension request. This last sentence of the first paragraph is the most impactful part. We are authorized to continue the schematic design and preferred schematic phase that we're in now through June 30th of next year. So this aligns with the schedules that we've reviewed at the last few meetings. It's a confirmation from the MSBA that we're good to go. And if we want to look at the detailed schedule, we can bring that up. But I'd say that this meeting went very well, and I'm not sure if Dr. Kelly, you had anything to note from the meeting, but MSBA has continued to be very supportive of this process and understanding of the extension. No concerns for me from left field as the OPM at that meeting. Not sure if you want to add anything else, being that you were at the meeting as well.
The only thing I would add is that Committee Woman Terry Kwan, who's been very supportive and actually was instrumental when we were trying to do the grant for the new high school labs. She was one of the members who came out for the site visit and said, this high school just is completely inadequate, and you really need a new high school, and we're not going to recommend that we give you new labs because basically it would be putting good money after bad. And so she reiterated her concerns that the children of Revere are really attending school in a dysfunctional building that does not serve their educational interests. And I assured her, and actually Acting Mayor Keefe was on the call as well. He assured her as well that the city is still very much invested in this project and understands just how urgent it is that we get a new high school for our kids. So.
Agreed. Thanks for that, Dr. Kelly. I'm going to just really quick, even though nothing has changed, I just have a whole bunch of documents open. And I think it's as a result of the MSBA board authorizing this. I'm going to highlight this date, June 21st, in red. This is the schedule that we've looked at for the last few months, graphic version of it. And we have the official go-ahead from MSBA as of the 21st. We're here on the 29th. I'm going to be reaching out to a few counselors who are also on this committee to just plot out council updates in the coming months. But The schedule that we've previously put in front of you, what we filled in on the screen graphically are the dates we reviewed at the last meeting. We'll be meeting on July 20th and August 10th and 24th. We'll be continuing to meet into September. And as you see this blue color getting a little darker, October, November, December, that's still the preferred schematic phase we're in. I just darkened it up because there's going to come October, that's when decisions start having to be made. So I'll reach out to the council and fill in some council updates for the next number of months, but the dates that the MSBA approved don't change anything in this schedule. Long story short, we're looking to make the decisions we need to make October, November, submit them to the MSBA in December, and move right into schematic design. Schematic design will take up January, February, March, April of next year. We'll look to submit schematic design at the end of April. Ultimately, that results in an MSBA board decision at the end of June. And I just plugged in this June 30th is now the current expiration of the feasibility study agreement between MSBA and the city of Revere. So everything the MSBA authorized at this meeting supports the schedule we've already put in front of you. And really what that comes down to as a takeaway is lots of updates until we get to about October, November, December. That's when decisions need to be made. And then we proceed to schematic design early next year, get that approved, and that all plots out to a sort of bond authorization vote by the city of Revere next July. So again, no dates have changed. Just wanted to reaffirm this based on the MSBA approving the schedule extension request last Wednesday. Are there any general sort of schedule or process? Tonight's really a design update centric night. We have no invoices to approve tonight. We aren't planning on going through the budget, but at the July 20th meeting, we'll do a more comprehensive schedule update meeting by meeting and go through the budget. Anybody have any just general questions on this MSBA process? Or if not, we'll move into the design update.
Brian, I was gonna say that our next meeting is July 31st. If we could have just some sort of presentation, short presentation to the council, that would be wonderful. And I can put that in with Ashley for you to be the first one to come up and talk.
That's perfect. I'm just making a note, July 31st, council
6
meeting.
o'clock.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
And Brian, can you just note for the minutes that Nick Rystrom has joined the call?
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. I think I got him on the way in. Yep, got it. Okay, I have it in the
Okay.
notes. So otherwise,
Well, one
sorry.
other thing I want to throw out about schedule, I think that we should be mindful of the fact that there could be some changes in membership on the city council and in the mayor's office
Mhm.
in November. And I think we really have to be conscious of that. We wouldn't want a current group of elected officials to make a decision that maybe would be changed shortly after with a different election. And I think we should work around that in our planning for when decisions are made, and ensure that we have a group that's going to be on board for 2 years, at least. 2 years or 4 years, Joanne? City council, is that 4?
Yes. 2.
So
Yep. Oh, I'm off of mute. 2 years. Yes.
2 years. So just to make sure that we have a solid, stable support group when decisions are being made.
Okay, that's a good idea. Definitely.
Sounds good. Any other questions about just general schedule and process? I'm gonna just put the agenda back on the screen. What we just spoke about was item 2. Someone just showed up. I want to see if that's a committee member. Nope. Mike from Perkins Eastman. So I think we're ready to move on to the design options update. And Dawn, I'm ready to drive. Do you want to sort of take over verbal clicker here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. We are going to start with a working group update. There's a couple slides ahead of it, Brian. I had an agenda. Yeah, so same as yours. design update, and then you could go forward, working group recap. If you go to the next slide, it kind of summarizes. And there's a lot here, but it was basically, we met last week, the 21st. There you go. And so myself and others from our Perkins Eastman team, Susan Gravelisi, thank you for coordinating. What's that? Sorry, I thought someone said something. So Susan, Mike Picardi, Rich Galucci, and Chris Bowen. Chris Chiramella was invited, but he wasn't able to attend. So that was the group. We recapped what we showed at the last SBC meeting, basically the 4 options that were shown, and then shared what we heard. Concerns about 6-story academic wings, the possibility of building across the culvert as more of a campus design, and potential to consider putting the gym at the main level, and how to spread out sort of the locker room, team rooms, junior ROTC. So we came to that working group meeting because we had a couple of weeks in between the SBC and working group with a few ideas. And that's kind of what's shown here, just that we came to the meeting with, hey, we heard possibility of a campus across the culvert. We had looked at some options with the gym at the first floor and showed things just for the sake of discussion. What we heard from this group was there were mixed feelings about the 6-story, that there was hope that the southeast corner, the sort of the big piece of the triangle on the right hand side up against Route 60. Yep, thank you, Brian. Could we fill that corner in, because there's not really a lot going on at that corner and along the main highway there. And also, had we considered, because we were already actually talking about it, looking at reusing the field house. I know we explored that previously in feasibility. So what we said was, hey, we think we should revisit that. So we walked away with sort of marching orders of, you know, other considerations and options. So I want to open it up if any working group members want to share what they heard, saw, said. Did I miss anything? Was there anything important that I'm overlooking in my recap? Susan, Mike, Chris, anyone? Perkins Eastman
No, I
team.
mean, that was pretty thorough.
Okay.
We did also mention, I know I had mentioned at the working group, even though we're coming up with like different ideas or designs for the exterior, that it's really ultimately a decision of the committee as a whole, as we had done in the previous design when it was Wonderland. At that time, like the exterior working group, the parameters of that group was more to pick the materials and bring it back. So, you know, that was just like the one thing that I had mentioned, regardless of like what ideas we may come up with, what design we like, it's still a whole decision of everybody until we pick that decision. And then the exterior working group will get back to work on materials as we had the last time.
Yes, thank you for that, Susan. And that's a great point. This is really a full committee decision, and the working group is sort of providing feedback along the way that allow us to look at other considerations. And you're going to see that tonight. So what I'm showing here, there are versions of that you'll see tonight. So if you want to move forward, unless there's anything else, thank you for that, Susan. I just want to kind of show the evolution. No? Okay. And feel free to interrupt me, by the way, like, you know.
Can I make one? Can I make one additional comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things we were talking about, both at the previous building committee and at the working group that we had last week, was kind of this conversation about where locker rooms should be placed in relation to the gym. And I said that I would connect with both our athletic director as well as Carl, who I think is on this call, just to kind of talk a little bit about how there's some state guidance on how supervision needs to happen in locker room space in response to state initiatives to prevent hazing in high schools and in athletic programs. And so I just wanted to perhaps update the group on that and just kind of put that in there, because I know there's been, as we think about these models or these different designs, the idea of having the gym on one floor and locker space on another. I just wanted to see, is this an appropriate time to share that, or is there a better time maybe later on? I just want to make sure I'm circling back, like I said, I would.
You know what? Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I was hoping you would chime in on that because I knew there was further out, communication that we needed in order to understand it. But if you want to go ahead and give us the background on that, and that way, as
Sure.
we look at these, we can, because there is one option I will show tonight that we look at sort of moving those lockers and team rooms over next to the gym. It would still be sort of a 2-story connection because there's enough of a footprint that you can't get it all in one big, one big floor on this piece of property. So if you can let us
Absolutely.
know what those state guidelines are, Chris, that would be
Sure.
helpful as we talk through these. So yeah, this is a great time. Go ahead.
Right. So I think the general gist of it is that in efforts to prevent hazing and situations that happen, bullying in lockers in high school and middle school athletic programs, kind of the ideal situation is that in our current setup, we would have locker rooms sort of on each side of the gym or in the gym where there'd also be a trainer's room and a locker room for officials as well that's in a neutral location. And the supervision rules basically suggest that coaches need to be within earshot of the locker rooms and are able to pass in and out randomly at times when student athletes are changing. And a coach's locker room located near those sets of locker rooms would be preferred when we think about this, just so that there's like a functional and supervision component of how we're able to supervise students. And so putting locker rooms and the gym at different spaces, obviously at the beginning of a practice and an end of a practice when there's changing happening and that supervision happens, that's one thing. But if there is a need for athletes to be both in locker rooms and coaches to be supervising out on the courts, we need to create a situation where we don't have unsupervised student athletes in the locker rooms at all times. That does not mean that we need an adult in there at all times, but we need to create a situation where it is not impossible for adults, whether that is the coach or the trainers who are working, to be able to pass in and out to provide adequate supervision. And so that is the gist of it. I think that I hope that kind of sums up kind of what some of the needs are, but I just wanted to make sure the group was aware of that. And I think that might not have been as clear at the last design, because this is something that has been a work in progress over this school year through the state and MIAA.
Yeah, I think that was helpful. And I think as it informs the design, we'll continue to work with your group, right, to understand what's possible and what's ideal and try to find a balance of, what fits on the site with what allows for your adults to have supervision at their convenience. So
great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think it's kind of a evolution, right? And as you said, the previous design, some of this wasn't in play quite yet or was in the works, but not necessarily flushed out. So having a better understanding of that and where the spaces are will be super helpful as we start to actually lay out the individual rooms within sort of the gym block of these designs. Does anyone have any questions on that before I get into the design options? Is there a write-up on that, Chris? Like, is there a guideline from the state or something, like, just so like our team can have it and understand it, digest it?
I can look to get you what exists. Yes, I will get you what.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Just because, great. Because then as we digest it, meet with the athletic director and the users, we want to have a good understanding of it. So that would be really helpful.
Sounds good.
All right, great.
I will ask them to get that to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what you're seeing on the screen, these are the 4 options we talked about a few weeks ago. We've got the H, the pinwheel, podium, and triangle. And again, recapping what we heard at the working group, concerns about the 6-story, concerns about trying to fit it all in within the sort of south side of the culvert, and then the gym being at the upper floor, which we just spoke about. So those were kind of the key takeaways. If I'm missing some things, please someone, chime in and share. But from that, if you want to go to the next slide, Brian, we sort of took away from that 2 options that we believed we could make some modifications to take that 6-story academic scenario and take it down to 4 somewhat easily. So with that, I'm going to show you 6 evolution or new options tonight. 2 will be versions of these 2, the H scheme and the triangle. 2 will look at a campus solution, which will put a piece of the building on the other side of the culvert. And 2 will look at scenarios where we try to keep and renovate and reuse the existing field house. So in a nutshell, it's 2, 2, and 2, and the first 2 are evolutions of these. So, and we have 2 views looking north and south, just like we did last time, of each view. So the other thing is, I zoomed out to see the whole site. We start to show bits of green where the fields would be loosely laid out in these. Next step is to get the site and civil and landscape involved if we're able to narrow some of these down. And lastly, I changed all the shadows to be December 21st at noon. So those are some of the changes. Up in the left, you can see the previous. Go ahead.
And Dawn, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but December 21st being like the worst day of shadows in the year.
That's correct. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. Yep. The lowest sun angle,
Yep.
for lack of a
Better way to
Yep.
put it. Thank you.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. I think the previous one was like late November, but I moved it to exactly. Our software allows us to do that. So thank you for that comment last time. In the upper left, you can see the previous, it had the 6-story 10 through 12 academic kind of on the left side, and then the freshmen on the right, still that way, except we took the top 2 floors and we put them over the gym building. Maybe not ideal academically, but would connect through that part of the school at the uppermost floors to have, not a 6-story academic wing, but to bring those levels down. Acoustically, we'd have some hoops to jump through as far as gym noise and being above some of that, and also where the locker rooms go and don't go will factor into this. But it's a version that we felt, you could take some of that 10-12 academic space and spread it out along the heart of the school to the southeast, and bring that overall level down. So this we're calling H scheme alternate 1. And this is the view looking north. If you want to go to the next one, you can see kind of the backside, the side that is the RMA and the culvert. We're looking to avoid that. Thank you. Have a connection from RMA to the heart of the school there at the dark blue section. And just for reference, that's always the case. The dark blue is the heart of the school. What we do have here is that central admin building so that wasn't previously shown, and we know that the space needs to be accounted for. In this scenario, we would put it in where we showed it originally in feasibility, which is across a culvert. We can, as we meet with Diane and her group, we can understand if that's really the best place for it, but we put it in recognizing that when we take the old building down, that will need to be replaced.
And I really think that's the only parameter on it, John, is that we're going to need someplace to go when they take the building down. I don't think
Right.
it's critical that we be attached to the building or not, so whatever works best for the project.
Okay. So we took for this one and the triangle, we assumed the same size we previously had because we had done all the programming on it and showed it across the culvert as a standalone. If you want to go, does anyone have any questions on this? So, otherwise, the heart of the school is the same. The auditorium still at the south. The gym is at the highway side, the southeast part of the building, because honestly, that's where it fits best in this particular scheme. Yeah, thank you. If you want to go to the next one, it's a version of the triangle. I mentioned this at the last meeting. You can see again, I showed kind of just for convenience on the upper left what we previously showed. We had the 10-12 that paralleled Route 60. We had the Freshman Academy at the south, and this is the one that kind of broke our north-south facing classroom rule. But we leaned into it. The gym is closest to the fields, and the auditorium backs up to RMA, which I think I heard could be a benefit for their use as well. And you can see that we do show the district admin across the culvert. But the changes we made was a lengthening of the 10-12. In the previous scheme, it was 6 stories. Lengthened it pretty much the length of the property, and then connected it to the Freshman Academy. Previously, they were kind of disconnected with an entrance at the heart of the school. And what we felt like was kind of an L shape of the 10-12 connecting to the freshmen with some breaks in that facade. could work academically and allow us to bring everything academically down to 4 stories from 6. So this was a reaction to, could we use a little bit more of the available site in this scheme? Could we reduce the 6 stories to 4? And what does that look like? So again, the fields are kind of where the existing building is. Thank you for going forward. You can see here from the RMA, above the RMA school, avoid the culvert as best we can. We've got the central or the district admin across the culvert, standalone. Any reactions, loves, hates, indifference? The main entrance is still from the School Street side. Like if you go back, Brian, I'm making you do a lot of work tonight.
No,
But
that's
if
fine.
you go back, you can see there, right? Like, you know, daylit from the south, views from and we don't have the roadway figured out, but definitely potential to have 2 drops, a separate car and bus. Maybe one can connect out to 60. I was saying in the working group meeting, sometimes it's easier. I know they're having bus issues with sitting in traffic from RMA, but I think what I said to Richie was, sometimes you can control the bus drivers, you can't control the parents and the student drivers. And so sometimes we make the bus drivers do things that maybe aren't ideal, but only because they are doing their jobs and following the rules, and the parents and students are going to do what's most convenient. So maybe the cars loop back out and don't get onto the highway, but the buses do, or something along those lines. And we still need to study it. But I think this plan gives us a little bit of flexibility, because that culvert is still basically, you can connect over it, right, and get out like they do now.
And Don, that does remind me of just one thing that I understand there's going to be a lot more discussion about what comes off of Route 60, what doesn't, but probably one of the handful of real benefits from the old building being on the west side of the site to it being potentially on the ocean side of the site is it is going to create, I know roadways aren't shown here, but there's going to be a lot more on-site queuing space. So ultimately there'll be a lot of space on the way in from the existing entry out on School Street, with a lot more parking near it. So I'm just trying to highlight one thing now that, these plans have been zoomed out to remind us of the whole site, that ultimately one of the benefits of moving this building out towards Route 60 is there'll be a lot more bus, pedestrian, parent, student queuing space, pullover space, access to parking, etc.
Yeah, I mean, that's thank you for that reminder. And in the back of our heads, we're aware of that, and we know that the number of buses is not significant. But we talked about this a little bit at the working group. But there are a lot of smaller buses and handicap accessible buses that bring students to the campus daily. So we want to be sure that safety and drop off and queuing are at the forefront of what we're thinking about when we, sit down with the site designers and work through some of these options. So that's a great point. These, being deep into the site like this does allow for quite a bit of queuing, which is great. And we don't have now, right? Okay. Any
Keep
other
ordering.
questions on?
I do not see hands. I'm checking for hands. I don't see any.
And people can just ask too. Like,
Yep.
Feel free to interrupt. So we're calling this the triangle alternate one, just for, so the H scheme and the triangle have alternate schemes that are basically iterations of what you previously saw. Hey, Nazra, I see that you're on. We had talked about Nazra possibly talking through these couple of campus options. Is that something you want to do, or you want me to keep going?
Either's fine. You can keep going, but I'm here. if you need
Okay.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hey, good to see you.
Mhm.
Okay. So building on Dr. Kelly's comment about, could you build across the culvert? What does that mean? What does that look like? Does that support the more campus feel that, was part of the original design goals, educational goals, was to really create an entire campus? So we looked at 2 possibilities of kind of break off pieces of the building that we thought could be sort of standalone or separate buildings. And in this case, what you're looking at is the Freshman Academy with the district offices across the culvert. And yep, so it's 4-story. freshman academy. And what we talked about internally with our design team was, is there like an alternative gym and the cafeteria with a satellite servery and basically a lot of, and even part of the media center and tech space that can fully support the freshman academy in a way that they come to the main building, as needed for specials or electives or, other parts of their day, but for the most part can be supported as a freshman academy. So those are things to consider. We're not necessarily showing all that as far as program right now, but those are ideas we were floating saying, well, how true of a freshman academy is this? What that does is allows us to spread the academic wings. It's kind of an L-shaped, paralleling the highway and backing up to RMA, the 10 through 12 academic wings. So only 4-story, and then connected with a 1-story heart of the school. Those look kind of long compared to some of the others. That's because we had to move some of the tech spaces and other spaces out of the heart of the school because it's only 1-story. Otherwise, some of those learning spaces don't get natural daylight. So that's the goal there. And then that heart of the school connects over to the health and wellness as well as the performing arts auditorium and music spaces. The gym is adjacent to the fields, which is a bonus there. We do have that lower east southeast corner of the site open in this scenario. And what we choose to do with that can be up for discussion. I don't know if we could fit a roadway there to get, one stream of traffic out to 60 like we did in the previous one. But those are things we can definitely look at. If you want to show the other view, Brian, awesome, thank you. So 4-story, all the academic. We tried our best with all these schemes to keep the number of stories down. We heard you. This one still shows the lockers below the gym though, just for reference.
So just one point to clarify, Dawn.
Sure.
When I've been talking about campus feel, I didn't necessarily mean disjointed buildings.
Okay.
What I meant was a real space where there was a destination, kind of like what we had designed at Wonderland, where there could be outside learning and all of that, and you wouldn't be right on top of people's property with neighbors, being upset and all of that. That's what I meant by a campus. You know what I mean? Like it was a real space, I guess. But so
Okay.
I didn't want you to think that I meant buildings needed to be disjointed by that.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
That's helpful to understand. And just for your reference, Mark on our team had done like a napkin sketch, for lack of a better word, like a sketchy thing where we talked literally about, do you disconnect from the 10-12 academic building to the freshman academic building, all the vehicular access, and that becomes like a pedestrian way, like a greenway, right? That is really like a campus. You picture some higher ed settings where they do have a couple separate buildings, but they're not far apart from each other. You could even consider a canopy or some sort of protective structure and, picturing a pedestrian greenway and then sending all the traffic out from the south of the building along the gym and auditorium and out, remind me of the street that they drive out onto now at that little triangle to the north.
Carrie F.
Carrie, thank you.
Yeah.
There, yes. So, our vision with this was to really create a safe pedestrian, student-driven space that they have complete access to, and the vehicles are separate from.
Yeah, we would need to do that without a doubt if the kids were going to be traversing back and forth for their electives, because those are going to happen for different kids at different times of day. So basically every period there'd be kids moving back and forth between those buildings if we went with an option like this. I struggle to think about all of the unique needs, especially of our students that have different learning needs. And when they're freshmen, are they in the freshman academy? And then if they're in wheelchairs, how do they safely get back and forth during inclement weather and, things like that. I know that we are at a very preliminary process point right now, but those are just things that weigh on my mind when I think about all of these things, as opposed to when I was talking about like the campus thing, I'm envisioning outdoor classes when the weather is nice, not must be an outdoor class, you know?
And I'm going to jump on for a few opinions. The most important thing here to me, obviously, is the ability to deliver education. But as someone who represents your OPM, as we look at some of these options, I just want to bookmark a few things that are challenges from a construction point of view. One of which Don touched upon. If the buildings do become separated, inevitably it's going to be more square footage than one consolidated building. And that's simply because of redundant utilities, potentially having to sort of spread out where cafeteria space, media center space. Inevitably, two buildings is going to be more square footage. Square footage is your biggest driver of cost by far. And outside of site work, building envelope is another major driver of cost. So a little bit more square footage should be assumed on a multi-building option. A little bit more envelope should be assumed. And the one other thing I'd add compared to I'm going to click backwards for a minute, so I hope I don't get anyone dizzy. But these first few options that we looked at here that do take away the 6 stories, but sort of beef up parts of the building to make it 4 everywhere and not have to go up 6. You can sort of start seeing from this that more or less these first few options of buildings are on the 2 fields behind the existing high school. And I'm going to go back to the other one as well. This one encroaches a little bit. One building, one construction site, put a fence around it, we build it. If we're looking at an option that separates the building, we are going to have to get into a little more complex discussion about phasing. This would obviously mean taking away existing parking on the site to build this separate building, which would mean we'd have to put it somewhere. Most likely means Ambrose Park, potentially other places. But I just wanted to, again, say education drives the bus here. But there is going to be an added cost for a few different buildings. It's mainly because of square footage and redundant mechanical utilities, building envelope, and also the temporary phasing costs of having to come in and out of where this construction site might be. So I'm going to bookmark that. And as we get into the 3 last options, I might reiterate it a little bit, because the option you'll see in a little bit that maintains the field house has similar concerns. But just so folks understand going in, probably a cost premium for more than one building, and there will always be a cost premium. And if we can't stay out of the backyard of the existing school to build this, there are certain schemes here that we might not need to put temporary parking on Ambrose Park. If we're going to build right out on the parking lot, we certainly will. So just wanted to note that for now.
Thank you, Brian. So let's keep going. So the other part of the building that our design team felt could potentially separate was like a performing arts center with the auditorium, music, spaces, and have that be separate yet connected via pedestrian greenway from the main building. So what you're seeing there is the auditorium, music spaces, district offices across the culvert, trying to stay out of the space that's needed to maintain the culvert, the gym closest to the fields. And this is an option where we looked at the locker room, team rooms, junior ROTC sort of spreading out to get the gym at the main level and have those spaces be at the same level with possible spaces above it at a second floor. And it would likely not be the locker rooms in that scenario, but maybe the junior ROTC classrooms as an example. The heart of the school gets a little bit smaller there. And then it connects to the freshman academy, which returns to the academic wing parallel to the Route 60 there. So the downside of this, you kind of have to travel through the freshman academy at some floors to get over to the 10-12. But it allows for space to spread the gym out. We have connectivity to both Performing Arts Center as well as the academic wings.
And Dawn, is that green space between the academic wing and the JROTC locker room? That's green
So
space?
It would be like a green roof over the underbuilding parking, I think is what we
Oh,
assumed,
okay.
because there's a level, right? Like similar to kind of what we did at the Wonderland scheme where
Yep,
there were parts of it that, remember, because we had the underground parking, we were able to make an outdoor, plaza slash green roof
Yeah.
slash outdoor classroom. Like that could be, it could terrace down to grade, or it could have some sort of connectivity there, right? But that
Yeah.
could really be like a quad, or like I'm trying to imagine how to best describe what that could be. But if you think about it like an academic quad in outdoor space, that's what we're
yeah,
hoping. Yeah. And it's south facing, so it would get lots of natural light. The buildings don't shadow it in
Yeah.
this scenario. Yeah. So lots of possibility there, Diane.
hmm
One quick question I throw out there, Dr. Kelly, other folks from the school, as far as separating buildings, do you think it's more positive to put things like auditorium over there as opposed to freshman academy? Does that change sort of how you'd view students coming back and forth, et cetera? Just something I'm curious about hearing your opinion on.
My personal take is that if we are going with a model where there is separate building space, and we'd have to leave one part of one building to get to another, that is more ideal for something like performing arts. The idea of having Freshman Academy as its own separate building, there's just sort of some like managerial and logistical, as well as sort of some leadership considerations that makes me think about in terms of how to coordinate across the different assistant principals, support teams, different roles, and like what happens with students in different grades. There's some that makes my mind go in a different way that is sort of a little more complicated to think through than say what we might have if the Performing Arts Center is across in a separate building. So that I do have a slight preference for arts versus Freshman Academy. Having freshmen in a separate place in the building is one thing, but having them all leave and I don't know, Dr. Kelly, I don't know if you have thoughts on that as well, but that's my first initial impression.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Chris, especially, I mean, I think that when we were first talking about the design of this building, a big emphasis after the community planning was that it would be usable by the community off of school hours. And I think we've, lost a whole lot of that coming back to the site, but I think that having the auditorium as a separate building maybe captures a little bit of that back. We won't have the kind of separation or spread that we needed to really make it be a community center, but I feel that reminds me a little bit of that part of the goal, so that would
That's
be a
helpful.
good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear. And that was something our team said, hey, what about this as like a standalone, a performing arts center, and you see it like that, where it's,
Yeah.
yeah. So
I do want to be clear that preserving a design where the ninth grade experience is able to be contained to a certain part of the building is very much aligned with research on the transition to high school and how we can best support ninth graders coming into school. So like, I want to be clear, like being able to have, whether that is one floor or one section or in whatever way that works out in the building. But I think performing arts in one spot and then freshman ninth graders in the building, but perhaps coordinated in a way where their teams of teachers are working with them in a place in like the own separate freshman cafeteria or those kinds of things. Like I do think that is worth preserving. There's a lot of research on how that transition to ninth grade is important.
Understand, Chris, and we agree. And there's other designs we've done that have that model. So we completely agree.
One other thing that I want to name before we lose track of it is we had originally talked about having dedicated like robotics and maker spaces, and those were going to be larger areas. Is that still being captured in these designs?
It is. The space for it is, and we assume it's part of the heart of the school because that's where they were visible and connected and on display, right? In I think the previous scheme I mentioned, the heart of the school was shrunk a little bit. Maybe it was this one. Nazra, you might be able to help me because she laid out the program on this. but that the some of those spaces spilled out into the more academic wing because
Okay.
it needed to be 1 story. So
Okay.
that's part of the reason we showed floor plans last time, because it's helpful sometimes to see where some of those connections are made, and we can
Yeah.
get back to that the next go around. If
Yeah.
if we say these are the whatever 3, 6, 7 schemes we like, whatever 4, then we can dive into that level of detail because we've done it. It's just to look at it in massing and then plan sometimes is a little much. So
Right, right. Just knowing that it's not lost
nope,
is good
none of that's
reassurance.
lost.
That's all. Okay.
Definitely not lost. Yes, thank you for that, Dr. Kelly. And that's true for all the schemes, not just this one, by the way, just so I'm
Yeah.
clear. Okay, so that's the campus performing arts. So we had a campus freshman, campus performing arts. These last 2 highlight some possibilities of keeping the existing field house. We know that it's larger than the MSBA would otherwise allow if we built it new. We do know there's complexities in trying to keep it both, bringing it up to code. When would we renovate it and still be able to provide physical education to the students of Revere High? And logistically, it forces us to connect the building at the tightest part of the site, right? Like if you think of it like a bow tie, we're at that tight part of the bow tie. But we went back and dusted off some old schemes, looked at what could be, made better, and came up with this, which is mostly 1 story. We do have the performing arts across, similar to the last scheme. The heart of the school becomes very linear because we try to connect that existing field house with the new academic wings. And it kind of, gets pinched at that point, but that could be where some of the more public spaces exist in that dark blue heart of the school. It separates the fields. The 2 Article 97 components, the baseball and tennis, are on the west. Turf is on the east, up against the roadway, and definitely builds on the tightest part of the site. But we thought it was prudent to, reconsider, because we figured we'd be asked, did we consider it? And we've been tossing it around. We should look at it. So here we are. So the academic wings, I think we were trying to keep those to 4-story. One might be taller than the other in the scheme, but Nazra and I were talking about the program spaces and think that they might even get a little bit longer if they have to, but to keep them to, I think she's showing 3 and 4 here, but I programmatically think we need 4 and 4. The heart of the school can connect that, and then there'd be a pedestrian access over to the performing arts and district. Yeah, right there, district offices. What that would do is force a connection at 60, right, to come along this east side of the building for a drop off, and then something off of the School Street access to the west. So there would definitely have to be a disconnect there from a vehicular standpoint. Thoughts?
I think
Looks really tight.
Yeah, I know it is. It definitely is, Dr. Kelly.
this is where I was gonna just try to, OPM wet blanket for a second. I want to reiterate, education and decisions about the school drive the bus here. And I also want to mention what I mentioned when I saw these drafts from the design team the other day. I appreciate the follow up on this. It's an idea that definitely needs to be explored. And I think the design team did as good a job with this. And the next option, the final option that you're going to see. However, from a how to build it perspective, I hate these options. And I'm just going to say, usually I said that to Don the other day.
It's okay.
I'm simply like, how we would sequester the existing building from building up against it, very hard. It's going to be more impactful than building over on the turf field. How we would reconnect streets and get around this building, very hard. When we would do the renovation, as Don mentioned, that the reports for this building, that the existing building, that has to be stripped down to concrete and steel. Everything in that exterior, not everything, but pieces, layers of everything in that exterior has ACMs, hazardous materials. We're gonna have to strip the whole thing down. It's not reusing the existing field house, it's reusing the existing field house structure and square footage. So much harder phasing. potentially a longer schedule. And I will say really off the top of my head, looking at these for a few weeks, there's not going to be a cost savings. And granted, as I think we all remember, folks that have been on the committee, the MSBA gives you less new athletic space than you have. So there's more square footage here. There's room for indoor track inside the building. Granted, the new schemes still have indoor track in the gym, but smaller track, more laps, etc. I just look at these and I get heartburn 3 years in advance because this is very hard to build on these sites. So I'll take the wet blanket off for now. Again, if this is the direction the school and the city wants to go in, we can figure it out. But building in the middle of the site, loaded with challenges.
Yeah.
There's a reason why this version that we dusted off and revisited didn't rise to the top previously, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
we looked at a similar scheme. It wasn't quite this, but like we had to make changes and the program grew a little bit from way back then. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason this got nixed previously.
Again, under the turnover every stone, which is what we're trying to do and what Perkins Eastman's trying to do, worthy study. So I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing the work that went into this.
Yeah. And we're not, you know, we're not offended, but we feel obligated to reconsider, you know, it's there and it's kind of an elephant in the room. And we all said, you know, someone's going to ask, did you look at it? And this and the next scheme, which I'm happy to move on to, consider that. Here we went way out of left field, no pun intended, and looked at like a real campus, right? Like literally taking the parts and making it more of a higher ed, you know, connectivity of buildings. And what's not shown here are, you know, all the pedestrian connections between these, more of like a true higher ed connection. So we have separate academic wing, 4-story auditorium that connects to the heart of the school where all the tech, MGH health center, all of those spaces would be. And then across the culvert to the freshman academy, of course, in the renovated field house, which to Brian's point is keeping the structure basically and rebuilding everything else. Not a lot of savings here, but the potential to have it be, you know, more of a small campus feel. I think Brookline High has something similar where they have like different buildings, and there are definitely some precedents out there that
Wayland might be one of them too. Yeah.
Wait, does Wayland have separate? Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. So, and by the way, back to the 6-story and vertical academic buildings, we looked at, was it Everett, Chelsea? Right? I think Brookline has a piece that's 5 or 6 stories. So through left field, when we met with them, said, hey, maybe those are some school districts we can reach out to and ask how that works academically, being so vertical. But all of the new options we tried to show today take that reduction down, just hearing the feedback from the previous meeting. So we haven't forgotten about that. We definitely will have those conversations and connect Revere folks with those towns or cities if needed. So that, if you want to go to the next one, Brian, this is the slide that recaps the previous 4 from last meeting. And then I did a recap of the 6 you saw today, and they're vertical. So the left 2 are the alternates, alternate H and triangle. The middle is the campus versions with all new construction. And the right hand are the, try to keep the existing field house and then build new for the rest of it. This was really just a cheat sheet if folks wanted to talk about different ones and compare any.
And I think that's a good reminder, Don, like that this meeting, as we go through July into the next meeting, I'd like the committee to focus on concepts. Is the concept of retaining the field house and spreading the building out a valid concept or not? If it's not, both options die. Is the concept of separating the building, whether it's the academic wing, which I think we heard tonight is not preferred, or maybe just the performing arts, a valid concept? And the last jump is the 4-story concepts, which are on the left, that take up a little bit more of that space out on Ericola Park versus some of the concepts here on 6 stories, So really the things I'd really encourage the committee to focus on, think about, talk to people, reach out to us, reach out to Dawn and her team. 6-story, which is what you're seeing on the screen now, a little bit more footprint. You'd end up with a little more site, a little bit easier to build, but I'm not going to push that on everybody. Or a 4-story that takes up a little more space versus separate the buildings versus keep the field house and attach the buildings to some degree. So that's
When do
what I would like
we
you
need
folks
to
focusing
be
on.
at the point that we're eliminating some of these things and highlighting others?
Dawn, you might have different ideas. I'm sort of thinking I'd like to let everything that's been presented last meeting and this meeting sort of marinate through the next meeting. And I think it would be nice to revisit this at the next meeting. There'll be another couple of meetings with the site working group, maybe that enlighten this as far as traffic circulation. But I'd like to say the July meeting would be a meeting that could we at least say, should we still study keeping the field house and doing some sort of reno? Yes, no. Would you like to be on both sides of the culvert? Yes, no. And we don't have to get down to 2 or 3 options, but getting down to 1 or 2 concepts with maybe an
Yeah.
option each would be awesome at the July meeting.
I agree.
Well, I just, in the interest of making sure that Dawn's time is used valuably, I would suggest that we eliminate the existing field house options where the buildings are stuck in that bow tie that's just too tight to have roadways or anything else. So I would make that motion that we eliminate those 2.
I'll
Second.
second that motion.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm going into meeting notes mode. I'm going to unshare the screen for a second because I got to find where sorry, that was Dr. Kelly. Motion to, I'm going to say a motion to eliminate options. Sorry, Don, were there, I'm going to
It
call
was
existing
to
field house
reuse the
options.
existing field house. Yep.
house options.
Yeah.
Eliminate existing field house options.
So, and just for clarity, Brian, could we frame that as eliminate the options that squeeze the building in the narrowest part of the site? Because that's
That's what-
really what
yep.
makes those options
Mhm.
unattractive.
Yeah.
It's not so much
Yep.
the field house.
Understood. It's a disconnecting of the campus because you can't get through.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
So how about motion to eliminate the existing field house options that locate the building in the central portion of the site and divide the campus into 2 portions? That sound okay? I can reword it any way possible. Sorry.
Can you, I'm gonna dictate to you. You ready?
Go right ahead. Yeah.
Eliminate the options that force the building into the narrow area of the site.
Got it. Is that still okay for a second? I know I heard a second.
Second.
Yes.
That was Stacy. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go through the folks we had here on the motion to eliminate the ad reno schemes that put the building in the middle of the site. Mike Picardi. And I might have to go back to see if we lost anyone.
I think
Looks
we
like-
lost Mike. I don't see him here.
I think we
He
lost.
said he had to
Mike.
leave at 6:15.
Yep,
Okay.
got it. Stacy,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes.
Principal Bowen.
Yes.
1 second, that went to the wrong spot. Joanne,
Yes.
and just to check, I still believe Rich Viscay, Don Chiramella is absent. Nick
Yes.
and Jerry. Okay, motion passes. We will Don, I think you heard that. We will drop those options. I think we'll look a little bit more about the campus option with the performing arts and district admin across the culvert. And then maybe the real homework that I do think that Dawn mentioned this, where I'm going to be reaching out to a few school systems. Everett's one of them, Brookline's one of them, places with buildings taller than 4 stories. I'd like to see if I could get a time from those schools this summer before classes back in, that folks from this committee could go on a little tour and meet some of us. We're going to try to put that together maybe before the next meeting, if in July. But if we can focus on 6 versus 4, and then the option of splitting the performing arts to the other side of the culvert, that's very helpful, I think, to the design team and to the team in general to try to hone this in.
And what we can do in the meantime is dive into the plans and the program spaces that you can start to see some of the connectivity, because I think especially with the performing arts as a separate building, understanding what's over in that piece of the building versus the main building and some of the connections I think it'll help drive some of the decisions. Yep.
Sort of talking out loud to us.
Sorry, Brian, can I clarify
Sure.
one thing that I think I heard you said, and I might have misheard you, but
Sure.
I don't think we necessarily want to get away from the 4-story options to favor the 6-story options. Did I hear you say that right?
Yeah, the both are still on the table.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Brian, I'm just gonna say that if you're looking for a building that's 5 stories, you need to look no further than the Garfield School. That's a 5-story building with 5-story a parking garage underneath. All our main mechanicals are up on the 5th floor, complete boiler room, complete electric room, the generator's up there. There's also a 5th floor to the library. So, you know, we don't have to go too far out of town, and that building doesn't jump out at us as such a giant. So that's right, we already have one.
Good point, Carl. And one thing, Dawn, I was sort of going to mention, I think to help the committee weigh the 6 versus 4-story options, I think something that we should sort of aim towards is developing the site a little more in the coming month or so, because the benefit of going vertical is going to be a little more circulation, a little more maybe program around the building, and
campus feel that Diane mentioned. Yeah.
Flip side of that, that's sort of the part of it that I would ask the design team to look into. And the flip side that left field and Consigli, as they get back online after the 4th, we'll look at is really high level comparing and contrasting the schedule and budget impacts of being on one side of the culvert and only on the parks versus being on both sides and needing temp parking. So I think that's something that could change the schedule, could change the budget. And I think the 6 versus 4 really comes down to is there a big gain on the site program end and site circulation from going a little more vertical, squeezing the building in. So I think those are both things that are good homework for us to work on between now and the July meeting.
And Brian, I'm just thinking as you're talking, maybe there's a collaboration between Consigli, you, us, that comes up with, you know, opportunities and constraints or pros and cons, or however we want to word it for each of the scenarios. A 6-story building that's completely connected versus, you know, a 4-story with a separate building across the culvert. Like, what are the pros and cons of all of them? And we could do it by scheme or we could do it by concept, and we can talk about what the best way to deliver that information is. But that might be helpful to the committee to be able to move forward with decision making. So we were already planning to do something similar with the scheme, so we can talk through the best way to do that.
Okay. So I think, and that was the agenda for tonight. Certainly want to pause and just see if anyone has any general questions, but just to reiterate, we have a number of weeks here. I hope everyone has a great 4th, by the way, but I think we're going to look to get back together in July, compare these sort of 4 versus 6 versus campus sort of approaches, come up with some big pluses and minuses, do a more detailed review of the schedule, what's coming up at meetings, when are the decision points happening. And that'll really help us start breaking this down into money. And as we get a little further into August and September, we'll start bringing in what is the cost associated? What is the comparative cost associated with all this to hopefully land us all a little bit later into the fall. So I'll take a pause and just see if anyone has any general questions, but otherwise we are through the planned agenda for tonight.
I think you have to call for public comment.
Any public comment, name and address for the record if so? Looks like a no, going once, going twice. Any new business from the committee? Otherwise, we just need a wave of the wand for.
Motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn.
Second.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you all.